to give this talk. I just want to give a 2-minute background on Jock Harmer. I think many of you know him, certainly us older fellows. Jock, I see, also went to University of Natal, so we're balancing out that Rhodes dominance. And then, so he did his undergrad degree and an MSc in Natal at Durban, and then did a PhD in Cape Town. After that, he spent time at the CSIR and then University of Pretoria. And then, like many of us, subsequently left academia and ended up as a independent, working in the platinum industry, interestingly, early on, and then more recently he's become involved particularly in the rare earth element business, and I think some of his presentation today will cover a bit of that in terms of rare earths and carbonatites and the stuff that he's really interested in. So thanks, Jock. We look forward to your presentation. Good luck.
Thanks, John. And thanks for indulging me in letting me in here as an Eastern Caper. Yeah, I just want to share some memories of working in Greenland, and I gave parts of this talk to sort of my exploration group. Just us in Africa, we tend to get used to being able to go back into the field whenever we want to. It might be messy, it might be muddy, it might be hot, but we can get there. Whereas Greenland is a very different situation. So first off, why Greenland? Why did I get involved there? When I was exploration manager for African Platinum, sort of 2005, 2007, one of my responsibilities was looking around the world for alternative PGs. This was the time of the PG boom, and met up with a group called Nuna Minerals at one of the PDACs, and there was a lot of snake oil being sold in those days, and I quite liked what they had to say and the way they were doing things. So I had that in my mind. Then FPLATS was bought out by Impala in the beginning of 2007, and they approached me to join them to sort of sort out a whole bunch of the exploration assets that FPLAT had. So that's when I started consulting. I didn't want to join a big brother organization, and so I negotiated with them to consult for them. And when I joined, when I started consulting, I increased the size of the exploration wing by 100%, because Peter Harrison was the only other guy that was in there. And Peter and I were comparing notes about, he had the same sort of thing around the world, and we both were he'd also picked up on this Nuna mineral. So we spoke to Les Payton, and we flew out there in 2007 to have a look and talk to the guys, and we both then felt it was worth having a punt, and we got Impala to take out an option on some of their PG projects. So that's why Greenland. So let's just have a look at a couple of things. This graphic here just shows you sort of sitting on top of the world. It's a big surface area with a very, very small population. If you work out the population density, there's no problem with social distancing out there. The capital is Nuuk. I'll talk about that just now. And the first European settler was Eric the Red in 990. He settled there after being kicked out of Iceland. And the people in Iceland were the Vikings that didn't get on with their colleagues in Norway. So this guy was probably obviously a bad dude. And when he was expelled from Iceland, he sort of went around, found Greenland, and came back and gave the name. He called it Greenland. A colleague of mine pointed out it was probably the first real estate fraud, because if you were expelled from Iceland, you could actually, if you could persuade other people to come with you, you could take them with you and you could settle. Eric the Red's son, Leif Erikson, was the first European, supposedly according to the sagas, that set foot in North America. So Greenland's an autonomous territory within Denmark, within the Kingdom of Denmark, according to the Self-Government Act of 97. In 2008, they had a referendum to say, okay, do we support this, or where do we want to go? And 75% odd of the population said, no, we wanted full independence. And that was ratified for the Danish parliament. And so they're on a track to become fully economically independent from Denmark. This is really important because they identified mining as as one way of actually getting this economic independence. And so they're very, very pro mining. So just to put the size in context, it's sort of between the size of Saudi Arabia and DRC, with their population nothing like what we find in those countries. So they have a population of 56,000 that would fit into the Ellis Park Rugby Stadium and still leave a whole bunch of empty seats. And with in context as well, when we went across there, Impala had more employees on staff than there was population in Greenland. So to get to Greenland, the easiest way is an Air Greenland flight from Copenhagen. That takes you across Iceland, which is quite an interesting thing. You land in it's a converted old Air Force base of the Americans in Kangerlussuaq. And you fly across in these big tours, and then you get onto a little dash and fly down to the capital, Nuuk. So when your first experience of what Greenland's all about is coming in over the east coast, and this is what you see, and it's pretty intimidating. You can barely see where the ice flows on the ocean stop and the land actually starts. And you say, well, how the hell do you do geology in a place like this? But this is 3 days later on the other coast, on West Greenland. This is what it looks like. So the West Greenland is a completely different story to East Greenland. So that's a Google map of Nuuk, the capital, as a population of about 17,600. That was back in 2017. There's approximately 45 kilometers of tarred road. And that's probably more than half of the total sort of roads in Greenland anyway. So Nuna Minerals, the company we were there to being better, their offices, their new offices which were built in about 2016 are there. And the other important part is the Gotthard Brewhouse down here, which nowadays would be called a craft brewery, but then it was just a brewery, a little restaurant place, did really good beer. And this is the muskox on their label, and they served really great muskox steaks. Okay, this is what it looks like in sort of midwinter when the lawyers finally got the option agreement sorted out. I had to go over and get all the data. I was there in February. This is what it looks like from outside the offices, and this is what it looks like in the middle of July. So much more balmy conditions, and you know, a lot of outcrop to see in the summers. So infrastructure, I call it BYO, bring your own infrastructure. As I said, 40 Ks in Nuuk, probably less than 80 Ks throughout Greenland. Main access is via the coastline, the fjorded coastline, gives you a lot of access. And also the Greenland 4x4. And this is what it is. This is inevitable if you're going to work there. And Nuna Minerals had one of these on rental from Air Greenland for the entire summer with 2 pilots. And that was their main source of transport. So the field season, all going well, is about 4 months long, from mid-May to about mid-September. If you're doing drilling, there's a possibility of squeezing in an additional month either end of the season, depending on what the weather's like. And most of your access is using these, the big fjords there are navigable by freighters throughout the year. So that's on the west coast. So that's a really important point. And there's this, on the Fiske Fjord, there's this quarry. They quarry pure olivine, which is used for for casting and stuff in Sweden. And their very first, when they opened up, their very first shipment took place 15th of December, right middle of winter. You'll see here, it's not iced up at all. This is the quarry, and this is when we were there in 2007, a ship docking and being loaded. So this is your best way of access in there. It's expensive. These are some old costs, but from around 2009. And so their estimate of all-in drilling costs about $580 odd a meter. Countering that, it's an incredible can-do society. It's tough, it's rough, it's expensive, but just suck it up. Let's get on with it. Okay, so let's get on with looking at the PGE exploration we did there. Excuse this term, the platinum octopus. I agreed to give a talk at WITS. Judith Kinnaird then approached me in the middle of a First Thursday club after 3 or 4 beers and demanded a title. So I said the quest for the platinum octopus, and sounds punchy, but explain it a little bit in a bit more detail, justify it, let's put it that way. So Nuna Minerals had a large licensed areas under license. Gold was their main target. They had a big gold project, the PGE, and then later on they added rare earths and actual diamonds in. So quite a diverse company. And what we're focusing on here are the PGE anomalies. They'd identified this in the Fiskefjord area through very regional mapping and sampling in over 95 to 97. And so Fiskefjord is this, looks like it's a major fault that runs through. You can see it's a big crack in here. This is the capital Nook. You see these nice deep fjords here, and that's the Fiskefjord running through there. Fiskefjord just means the fjord of fishes. So this is more or less the target area. So this part of Greenland, there's Nook there. There's a number of major terrains of different ages. And this is based on the Archaea terrain, which is the old Archean core terrain where the Mitsock gneisses and all of that occur. The terrain here are sort of granite greenstones, metasedimentary gneisses, but they're big keels of metavolcanic amphibolites and also ultramafic intrusive complexes. Some of them layered, and norites are conspicuous. And in local terminology, they refer to the norite belt of intrusions that run down in this area here. There's a recrystallized zircon date of 3 billion for this particular complex. So in other words, it's older than that. And these rocks here have all gone through granulite grade metamorphism. So here's a map of the area under license with the different ultramafic bodies flagged. But what I want to point out to, and something that's also very different to working in my experience in Africa anyway, is you can see the detailed geology, the detailed base map, geological map, beautifully mapped, very, very well done by the Geos guys, but no exploration being done on it. It's the sort of opposite to what we're used to in Africa. You know, we don't have maps. We go out and do the exploration, build our own map as we're going along. In Greenland, you've got these beautiful Geos maps. So these are just some of the different centers that they'd identified with PGE values. This one in the middle here called Amekok. And the Impala option focused on Nuna were quite keen on us looking at all of these things, but the argument was that due to the distance to the closest smelter or whatever, to make this thing work, it would have to be a massive ore body. The amphibolites at that stage were assumed to be the Metagabroic part of this big layered complex. Some of the other ones had probably better initial results, but they decided that we'd focus on Amekok. So we signed the agreement, they signed an agreement, and we could start work in 2008. So why the platinum octopus story? This is the outline, the dark green rocks here are the amphibolites, and you can see the ultramafics in these purpley colors largely around the edges, okay? So if you look at that part of it, it looks just like a giraffe, you think? Okay, so a giraffe in Greenlandic is in Kunkakatsuk, which the Nuna Minerals guys thought investors would not get their tongue around. So if you change your perspective a little bit, and look at the bottom bit here, it looks just like an octopus or a squid. And that in Greenlandic is Amekok. So that's what we're looking at. These were the results prior to us getting involved. There wasn't a lot of focused exploration. It was like just regional walk and grab type sampling. A large amount of the preliminary stuff done by the CEO himself, and regional scale on soil sampling. And most of the sampling, as you can see, is concentrated on the edges of this body. So this is classic, you know, if you want to do some basic exploration, you start with soil, stream geochemistry, soil geochemistry. What soils? It's quite interesting when you get onto the real, everything's outcrop. You know, why take the soil? You don't get the actual regional coverage that you would with the rivers, because you can see there's no rivers here. So you know, it was obvious that the first thing we had to do is get some real rock samples. So at the end of 2007, while we were waiting for the lawyers to get their act together, we scoped out some exploration that needed to be done of traverses across these bodies to be able to locate ourselves. And they got that completed late in the 2007 season. So that's when we started up. So from those preliminary samplings, we subdivided the body into 4 focus areas: the Giraffe's Head, East Neck, Paradise Valley, and South Margin. These are nicknames given by the field crew. Nuno appointed a geologist as their chief geologist for this project, Paul Armitage. Paul cut his teeth on the Platte Reef, so he had experience. He did his PhD on the Platte Reef under Ian MacDonald. So he had some experience in these sorts of things. And so we focused on these to sample, and we did 20-meter space, taking 1 kilogram composite samples on a series of traverses, you know, 250 to 500 meters apart across each of the areas. And Paul is a habitual mapper, so he did the detailed mapping that accompanied the sampling. So that initial phase demonstrated that the amphibolites were not associated with the magmatic complex. They were in fact country rocks. And they established the sequence was marginal gneisses. This is from the base up. A zone of tectonized rocks, nucleonorites with feldspathic peroxenites, hartsbergites, dunites, tectonized norites, with the amphibolites being the roof. So here's the detail of Paradise Valley, which was one of the major ones. These are the sampling traverses made across in the time. So here's some pictures. This is the outer contact, the Paradise Valley, the mafic, ultramafics on the left. And these are the outer contact area here. The view you're looking at there, these are probably 40 plus Ks away. Because of the clarity of the air, you lose perspective a little bit. This is Paul Armitage, the geologist, standing on the contact. These are the norites. This is the mixed tectonized contact zone. And if you go look at these things, this is the feldspathic peroxenite. Just sort of say again, these rocks have gone through granulite grade metamorphism. But because low-grade alterations in metamorphism, green schist metamorphism is largely a hydration thing. If you protect these against water getting in, you don't really change the minerals much. And so these are orthopyroxenes, primary orthopyroxenes within a cumulus plage out here. This is a poikilotic hartsbergite. You could find a number of outcrops in the bushveld that look exactly like that. These are cumulus olivines reacting with the magma to form the OPX, oiks, and whatnot. And these, you can see they wither out as little like egg-sized nodules. Very, very characteristic and just like the bushveld material. This is the CEO, Uli Christiansen. He's an MSc, Uppsala University in geology with Paul. One little chromite band they'd found, that's the only chromite in the area. Then the other contact down the bottom, the southern margin zone, these are the mafic, ultramafic rocks. These are the traverses that were put in. And this was one of Paul's detailed maps. Down here you find these are the norites and the norites, peroxenites, and the ultramafics with the amphibolites on the roof. So this is what it looks like from the air. You can see here that these are the norites, the lighter rocks, and the hartsbergites with these characteristic browning type of colors. So here we have these banded feldspathic peroxenites, with the norites, quite conspicuous color difference. And there's Ole standing next to these banded felspathic peroxenites. Very, very similar to the Bushveld lower critical zone rocks. This just shows this very well-walked pathway here with very little population, 0.026 per square kilometers. How do you get these well-walked pathways? Well, these lads are running all over the show there. So this is just to give you an idea of how things worked there. Between 19th of June, 16th of July, all those traverses were put in. A total of 896 samples were collected, and the PG assay results we got back by the end of July, within a couple of weeks of the project ending. This is at a time, as I said, during the platinum boom. As I recall back then, we were waiting 4 to 6 weeks turnaround to get PG values back in, and yet, you know, we were able to work at that sort of turnaround. We dilocated some 0.5 gram to 1 gram per ton things. These are in situ. We saw that the norites were playing a role, very similar to the Bushveld. We'd like to think about these things being ultramafics, but it's near where you get the phage cumulus that you get the PGE. Interesting things, not associated with sulfur. We found very few sulfides at all around. Very high platinum palladium. The regional results showed high platinum. That was one of the attractions to us in Impala. Very low in gold. You'll see that later. Okay, we followed on from that to doing detailed channel sampling, actually cutting sawed channels in the outcrop. And these were 20-25 meters long and sampling down at about 50 centimeters cuts. So these are the technicians with the cutting tool. This is not a particularly good outcrop area, but here's a channel that's been marked out. We've marked these things 20 Ks, and these are the sampling markers on that. And here's a cut channel. You'll see coming along this is Peter Brown, who took over as their senior geologist while we were working on that. So you can see there's a cut slot, and you take really precise 50 centimeter sections across there. In all, that totaled up to about 1,100 channel samples, 10 different channels, and these were able to confirm the presence of narrow reefs of PG rich. Again, the grades were not mega, about 0.5 to 1 gram per ton, very high, consistently high platinum palladium. So here's some of these cut. These are the channeled samples across the details. Here we have Hartsbergites, the norites, and these peroxenite layers in there. And you can see the hits are close to, they're in the norites close to where we see these peroxenite interfaces. Ian MacDonald from U Cardiff got involved and did some intensive geochemistry. This showed these are the leuconorites, ultramafics, and you'll see that the amphibolites are very, very different. And on the basis of that and the structural mapping that Paul did, it was quite clear that these were the roof. They're not associated with the late intrusion itself. When you look at the platinum group elements, you'll see one of the characteristics, very, very low gold. And in the marginal zone, the southern margin zone, very, very high rhodium. And at that stage, rhodium was up in the, I think it was close to $10,000 an ounce. And so this created quite a bit of excitement sort of at the time. Okay, so just to summarize what we accomplished there, 1 and 2,500 scale mapping, we identified a mineralized PGE zone, and then channel sampled that down to almost what you would do with a drill hole within 3.5 months. Okay, and one of the just to summarize the reasons for that, having a geologist as the CEO helps a lot. And when I first met up with Nuna, they had a little office in the bottom of Nook, and at that stage they were expanding. They got a lot of investment, and they built a new office facility. Here they're new offices, and what Ule did was to keep the base, the bottom layer of the bottom floor of the building, and he formed a company with the local municipality, raised money, set up a company to buy the assaying equipment. And he built an assay lab in the base of the building, okay? Independent company from Nuna, but Nuna were a shareholder in it. Then got ACT Labs in Canada, who were doing the assaying at the time, to run this laboratory independently as an independent contractor. So they sent operators out from Canada, they set the thing up, got it accredited and everything. And so we actually had a fire assay and fully fledged laboratory in the basement of the offices in Nook. So as we were in the field, the samples were helicoptered, choppered back to Nook. These guys did the analysis, and in some of the big regional sampling programs, we were getting the results back before we got to the end of the Traverses, which helps a lot, as you can understand, in terms of progressing. Just before we leave, this final slide will say, well, sometimes it's not a good idea to have a CO that's a geologist. What happened then was the banking crisis hit at the end of 2007 and into 2008. As a result, Impala sort of pulled out of any overseas operations. The agreement with Nuna had a minimum spend clause. And so there was still more than half of that in the kitty. And so to close this down, Impala just said, well, do a drilling program. Good South African approach. We weren't sort of ready for that yet, but you go ahead and do it. So 2019 was to do 600 meters of diamond core drilling. There were 5 holes in the Paradise Valley area and 2 in the southern margin. The first hole we drilled, this was in Paradise Valley, in this wall here, was this was the first hole in that area. The drillers was Cartwright Drilling from Newfoundland. They were busy drilling one of the gold prospects. It was about 48, 49 kilometers as the crow flies away. So they brought the rig across in flights, in pieces, and then reassembled it on site here. And this one here, these are the drilling rods coming in. There was a wind blowing, and as he came in, the things were spinning around. And when you're standing on the ground trying to control it, it gets a bit hairy. All he did was to back off, put them into the snow field here, took away the angular velocity, picked it up and brought it in. These guys were really pretty good. So this is the rig assembled and ready to drill. And geologists waiting for some action. So the results of that was they confirmed the persistence of these reefs at depth. The hope was that the grade would increase as you got into, basin part or whatever, but it never got much beyond 1 gram per ton. So Impala pulled out of all their overseas operations. They regarded this as a sort of technical success, but we didn't go, they didn't take it any further than that. The interesting thing here is I found this old plot of mine. If you just look at, they found we had these high palladium, low palladium. Those days, palladium was a bad news. Now the values are not that different. And you'll see that those channels mirror very much what we got out of the borehole. So quite an interesting approach to sampling in those setups. All right, so can you get that type of quick turnover in a short time? Narrow field season, you lose days with weather. So your logistics are critical. Like when you make the most of those months of clear weather. So this was the Nuna way. So what they do, load up all the camping stuff and everything for a base camp from head office, take it on a barge. This is ahead of the season starting. Technicians and that go up and establish the camp. And so this is Kusuk Camp. There's a helipad. This is a lake. So this is the actual fjord, and this is a suspended, elevated lake. And these are weather havens. That's the main camp there. Okay. And so there you have kitchen, mess stores. This is the accommodation for the pilots and the VIPs. Palazzo Pipi. That's the toilet. And the geologists live in these are their tents. Okay. I was regarded as a VIP, luckily, because I was managing the stuff for Impala. And yeah, by the way, I was managing this, not doing the day-to-day stuff. I went through there for sort of 2-week-long trips. Paul was doing most of the stuff. I think I had this little hut here. This is the little logging shed. These were not our cores, these were one of the other projects. This was our splitting setup. We were isolated down away on the other side of the hill because you couldn't disturb the sleep of the pilots. They had 2 pilots and they worked continual shifts. They drilled through the night as well here. Okay, so at the end of that, that season, they had a sort of wrap-up session with the geos and talking through in all their licenses. They'd just taken out licenses for diamonds further north than where we were working, and I noticed on one of them that there was a carbonatite, and so I actually, inquired, because at that stage I was busy with a company setting up and looking for rare earth projects in Africa, I was able to fly. They flew me up onto the carbonatite, and right at the end of the season in September 2009, and I was able to get 2.5 hours on this particular complex. That was just because weather constraints. We waited like 2 or 3 days to get a helicopter, that conditions to get up there. And there was a very detailed PhD Geos memoir by this guy Knudsen, so I knew what to look for. Took a bunch of samples. 2 of them were fairly high rare earths, and so on the strength of that, they asked me to submit a proposal for a proper exploration study, which I did, and then I designed and managed an exploration program on this carbonatite in 2010. In between this and getting there, they'd found a second carbonatite. They had a license, another carbonatite, one of the other licenses. So in 2010, we went out and actually did the some exploration on, for rare earths. So just to try and keep up with this fancy titles, rummaging for rare earths. So here's the west coast of Greenland. There's Nook as a marker, and these are the kimberlites and kimberlite-like ultramafics, lamprophytes and kimberlites, these red dots. And there's a bunch of carbonatites coming through. And there's this one here is Kakasuk, and down here is Tikiusak. These were both under license to Nuna. This one up here, Safatok, is a fairly well-known carbonatite. There's a company called Hudson Bay who were exploring for diamonds up here. The diamond industry wasn't all that good. John will tell us more about it next week, I believe. And so Hudson Bay redesigned themselves as a rare earth company. Spent quite a bit of time talking to us and not getting some tips. But I'm not sure, I think they still have that project. Anyway, so the 2 we're looking at is Kakasuk there and Tikiusak. And here's a map from Sebastian Tapper and all, who did the first write-up on Tikiusak. You'll see that there are 3 provinces here, different ages. The Safatok area, they're sort of 600, 500 million year old. Tikiusak is young, it's sort of like Karoo aged. And then down south is the better known Garda province with lots of alkali silicates and carbonatites in there. So these are 2 different ages, but in the same sort of general area. So just to highlight those 2. Tikiusak was only discovered in 2005 by Gale, so we were there in 2010. Quite exciting to be in there. It was written up in 2006. It's 157 years and quite detailed geochemistry, not so much geology, but detailed chemistry, including isotopes and all sorts of fancy things in this report up in 2009. But we're the first exploration to be done on there. So this is the discovery type geophysics. They had this anomaly along with stream sediment sampling anomalies, and that they used to trace. They went back in, and this is the Aramag anomaly here. So they defined what they call the complex. That's the Aramag anomaly with a core area in the middle. And then this is they've got out here is the extent of the influence of the carbonatite. It's not the carbonatite itself. So that core zone this is what it looks like here. There's very little outcrop or no outcrop. And you're right on the edge of the inland glacier. So this is the edge of the ice cap. So there's nothing out that way. So when we were traversing down, we found there was very little outcrop here. There was a very thin veneer of till, only about 1 meter thick, but it was enough to mask what was underneath. So we were limited to sampling in these gullies. And what we found was that rather than a big plug of carbonatite, these were sheets. So these brownish color thing here are intrusive sheets of carbonatite cutting into the gneisses. So overall, we estimated probably no more than 10 to 15% of that area that created the magnetic anomaly was actually carbonatitic. These were narrow sheets like this. The Nuno consultant geophysicist did some workups to look for texture in the mag, and you'll see here this upwardly continued modeling. You see these very nice indications. It looks like a sort of digestive system, but they're like swarms of like arcuate carbonatite or dikes of some sort. And that's exactly what we saw in these gullies that we logged. And so you'll see here's the intrusive carbonatites intruding into these gneisses. You'll see the gneisses are blackening a little bit alongside the contact. That's alkali metasomatism or phenotization, which is a very good characteristic of carbonatites. These were calcite-rich, magnetite calcite carbonatites, which in the gospel, according to me, has fairly low prospectivity. They're not ideal things to chase up. You wouldn't target these. And the assays we got back proved that. So these were the samples we took initially. That went off, that batch went off. And when we got the results back, they weren't encouraging at all. We were only here for about 10 days, so we got the results back while we were in the field. And actually, in fact, we didn't. We sampled those. And then we said, well, look, I don't think those are going to carry anything. We went back to the mag, well, not the mag, but the radiometrics. And here's the core, that carbonatite core on the map. And there was a high thorium kick just outside of this core area. So we went to investigate to see what we could find up here, those two things, and found this rock that looks very coarse-grained, and just the texture is very, very similar to pigmatoidal type stuff that I'd seen in East Africa that were rare earth mineralized. So we thought, look, this looks much better candidate. Submit these as well. And these are the samples we took, and you can see we got well over 1% to 1 to 3% in all of these, just based on that on the textures. It was quite nice. These results came back afterwards, so that was really interesting. The main focus of our attention was this complex called Kakasuk, which has a bit of an identity problem. The survey called it Kakasuk, and that's in all the literature and everything, but Ule, the CEO, very proud Greenlander, said they got it wrong. This name of this area here is Kakatasak, which basically means the place that stays green. And it's historically well known through the ages because it stays green, the reindeer concentrate here, so it's a major sort of hunting site. And so the company called the project Kakatasak, the proper one. It's got this conspicuous, slightly green color. So this is the carbonatite in here. And this lake, we call it Oxbow Lake. So there, Knudsen had done his PhD and published a memoir on it. Again, it's not a plug. These black things here are the carbonatites. So a series of concentric carbonatite sheets around a core with, he also describes peroxenites, glimmerites. And these glimmerites are nothing more than the phenotized country rocks with the development of phlogopite. So very little actual carbonatite. But he did a detailed petrological study and he highlighted these so-called lanthanide-rich calcite dolomites. And these were the things that I actually sampled in my initial exploratory trip that had the high grades. These are fairly smallish dikes, so that the trick here was to find, see how many we could find, see how, if we could find any bigger ones, what would the likely tonnage be? They would probably have the grade, but would they actually have the tonnage? And so this is an area here, that's where that's our camp. So there were, you know, there was myself, Paul, and 2 Cardiff students that were with us. And down here you can see there's a few little huts there. Those are abandoned derelict Geos accommodation from when they were doing the mapping. And those have been used through the years by fishermen coming to thing here. And the students found some rather interesting Scandinavian magazines in there, which they were very, very pleased about. I'll say no more. This is, we were, you know, we're just tenting out there, and we'd get provisions flown in every 4 or 5 days. One of the students took this picture, and it's quite funny. It looks like I'm a bit concerned about this guy crashing, and I was just holding my hat on, really. This was the mess tent. After we all had a go, they all decided that I cooked the best, so I did the cooking, they did the coffee and the washing up, so they called it Jock's Bistro. These are what these little dike things look like. They're small. That is a smallish one, but they're quite, these are all nices, very conspicuous. And when you look at them again, you've got this pigmentoidal texture. I'm going to get too technical, but these are normally relics after Burbankite, which is an alkali rare earth carbonate. And you'll just notice here, I'm just highlighting the fact that everyone's got the bags on their head. This is me taking a sample. You'll see that I've got my pants all tied up and a bag over my head, and that's to get rid of mosquitoes and black fly. And this is the cap they gave us. This is the Nuna Minerals cap, and at the front show, if you clip it on, there's a built-in net vest that you can keep the flies off. One of the interesting things you discovered working in the field there is that you can walk faster than a Cucurbitaceae mosquito. So when you're traversing, these are a pain in the butt to have, or a pain on the head to have when you're walking around. So you walk along and all you realize, okay, the mosquitoes have left us, you take it off, you chat away. When you stop at a rock and start talking, within about 5 seconds, the mosquitoes catch up with you. So we did quite a lot of sampling. We picked up as many of these little dikelets, trenched a whole lot of them. And these were the results. Both the trenches and the outcrops gave us quite good values. Anything, say, 1.5% would be regarded as probably as grade. So this was really encouraging for these initial studies. Okay, so that's what we wrapped up. So essentially, what happened next? On the basis of that, at the time, I'd set up a little company trying to find rare earth assets, and my co-investors in that said, okay, boys, that's enough playing around. You've got to focus on getting this company going, which we reversed the things into an Aussie listed company in 2011. So I was out of the game. Paul and the other guys went back in. They did quite a bit of drilling, 2,000 meters on both Cucurbitaceae. That didn't go very far, but focused on Cucurbitaceae. And on the strength of that, they actually signed an earning agreement with Kores, the Korean Resources Corp, who were looking for rare earth assets. They signed a similar one with Frontier on Sunkorpsdrift in the Cape. And they drilled again another 2,000 meters in 2014. Then unfortunately the wheels came off, and Nuna Minerals were a bit too widely spread. Their principal investor was the government of Greenland. They wanted to sell their shares and get out of that, and so they spent a couple of years trying to get investors to buy in. That failed, and in the end, they had to file for bankruptcy in 2016. So they essentially closed their doors in 2016, which was really sad. And I gather that all their licenses are actually now back in play. So that's it. It's a site from just north of Cucurbitaceae looking down into the local fjord. Great. Any, are you going to process questions?
Thanks, Jock. Yeah, lots of questions. I'll just get the ball rolling, Jaco. It's quite interesting to see those three different ages of your alkaline rocks and kimberlites, which fit sort of the Proterozoic Cullinan, the 600, 500 million year old Phoenicia, if you're looking locally, and then obviously, you know, the younger what's it, Jurassic, Cretaceous kimberlites and alkalic rocks.
Yeah. Now, it was interesting in 2010 being there because they had, I can't remember his name now, Hutchinson. They had a guy who was like focusing on their kimberlite stuff. And in Tikiosak, there are a lot of these alakite dikes, you know, cutting through or near the complex. And it was quite interesting to see, you know, they're doing the indicator mineral things. We're all giving really nice vectors, but they all vector into the middle of the glacier. So,
yeah. And again, just for interest, I mean, Larson and Sebastian Tapper have done some good work on those, I think, particularly the kimberlites and the ages. Sebastian obviously is a lecturer at UJ, and Katie Smart's husband, who Katie's at Wits. All right, questions?
Natalie's got her hand up. Guys, you can put on your video so that we can see you again. Natalie, go ahead.
Can you see me? Can you hear me, everyone?
yeah.
Maybe slightly off topic, but I just wanted to know if you'd noticed if there'd been a noticeable shift in the field seasons due to any sort of climate change or anything like that. Longer field seasons or anything to that effect.
I haven't heard any reports of that. It's quite interesting with the global warming story. To the Greenlanders, they think this is the greatest thing, you know, because they're getting more and more land that's coming out.
Yeah.
And you hear all these, you know, which are serious, the reports of the glaciers melting and stuff like that, the Greenlanders think this is great. They're getting more country.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same in Canada. They say we'll be able to open up more exploration possibilities there, but I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of contact with the guys, you know, subsequently, unfortunately, but I would suspect there wouldn't be a major change, you know, probably because when those things shift, you often find you get stormier bits, or you get, you know, you get into that bad area where you get lots of rain rather than snow and clear areas and stuff.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, it's just very interesting. Sounds like a really cool place to work.
Excellent. It's fantastic. And they really want, it's what was an amazing change for us, you know, they want you to be there. So when we arrived there to go and get all the thing for Impala, there was like a demand from the local minerals, that we need to go down and see them. And we went down there, and, you know, they don't say, well, hey, you know, you've got to do this and do that. The first thing they say is, you know, you've come to the right place. You know, this is the good thing, and they want you to be there. It's got to change.
Thanks.
John Trustwell, you've got a question?
But he's still muted, isn't he, Penny?
Just hold down your space bar, John, and then we can hear you. And then after that, we'll hear what Elaine has to say. Okay, Elaine, maybe you want to take the question so long? Speak to us, Elaine. You're both unmuted now. John, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Hi, John.
Hi. This is a bit of a trip down memory lane, but when I joined WITS very many years ago, at the same time did John Ferguson. And John had worked previously with the Danes in Greenland. And he and I actually both went to Australia about the same time and worked in then Bureau of Mineral Resources. He went off into mineral exploration, setting up companies and getting funds over a long period of time. And I remember him saying that he worked then in Australia and Canada and Greenland, and saying that he had been in Greenland every year for 30 years and had been given a gong for his efforts in relation to exploration in Greenland. I'm sure it's a chap, Jock, you will have come across in your workings, and perhaps more recently.
Yeah, in a way, he was instrumental in me getting involved with alkaline rocks and carbonatites. When I was doing isotope work at BPI, he was just sort of leaving bits, and Grant and Spike McCarthy and John Ferguson got hold of me and tried to persuade me to do a PhD on the Pilanesberg, which sounded like a damn good idea. So when I applied for exemption or postponement of my military service, they sent me my call-up papers. And I decided, well, what the hell, let's go and do it and get it out the way. And when I ended up in the CSR and doing some in the lab there, I thought, well, okay, what should I start? What can we look at? And went and did the Leeuwfontein complex just north of Pretoria, dated it and did some chemistry on it. And you know, it carried on from there. So I remember John very, very well. That would have been 76, 77, I suppose, 77, 78.
Thank you. Jean Malang, you got a question for Jock?
Yes, Jock, just a quick one, and that's to do with maybe remote sensing wasn't needed because the outcrops were so good, etc. However, my ears pricked when you mentioned potential field, in this sense, magnetic data. How was that acquired specifically for this project, and how is it acquired? Is it airborne or is it field data? Just a bit of insight into that would help. Magnetic.
Yeah, it was airborne. The Tikiosak one and those were regional surveys that led to the discovery of it. Carbonatites, particularly the early stage calcite ones, the high temperature ones, have lots of magnetite in them, so they tend to respond really well to these. So you get these fairly good patterns on it. They then, I think, I don't recall whether they actually reflew it at a higher resolution stuff, but it was airborne. And that's another thing in Greenland. There's just so much information around that you can get. You know, they throw at you. It's not stuff you have to go to the survey and fight them and try and to pay them huge amounts to get out of it.
Thank you.
Jock, I see you did a bit of sub-horizontal drilling there, very effective way, a good return on your core, whereas when you drill vertically, you get a very small section. Were you able to control your direction over what distance did you do that? You know, how well did you control that?
Yeah, these were shortish holes. They weren't much more than 60 to 80 meters, 60 to 100 meters, as I recall. The drillers were a group called Cartwright Drilling from Newfoundland, Canada, and they used them for all the drilling. In fact, Paul ended up moving across to do some work with them, Kango, who have a project in Malawi, and they ended up using them as well, because local guys were having problems drilling in some of the material. So they did all the downhole surveying, and there was not much of a problem. The grain, the foliation there was, subvertical, so there's no point in drilling. You had to drill sub-horizontal. I don't know if you ever experienced Newfoundland drillers. They speak something, but they say it's English, but it's impossible to understand what they're up to. I spoke to a Canadian colleague, and she said that, well, if they ever have interview in Newfoundland on Canadian television, they have subtitles. People know what they're talking about. Quite
sign language.
Real characters. Yeah.
Anybody more for questions?
Thanks, Jock. That was really good and interesting. So I really appreciate that. Henny, did you get it taped?
Yes, it's taped. I'm about to shut down there, so it's available for you guys for the next 10 days or so. If you want to refer anybody to listen to it, thank you very much, Jock. I really enjoyed listening to that.
No, that's a pleasure. Thanks for
involving me. And just wanted to say welcome and thanks to all the new members. There are quite a few new names on the list there, so fantastic. We really appreciate your presence, and if you've got any good ideas for speeches or talks or presentations, please let us know. Thanks Henny. Thanks for running the show again. That was good. Thanks, Jock.
What's coming up next week, John?
Is that
Next
Bristow
week,
fellows, huh?
yeah, I'm going to talk about diamonds, those important minerals, particularly the pretty coloured ones. Here.
Okay, we're back onto diamonds, guys. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a good one then. Bye-bye there.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks,
Bye now.
Eddie. Thanks, John. Thank you very much, Jock.
Pleasure.